Cassie didn't know the two men watching her through the restaurant window were alpha wolves. She didn't know they'd been circling her territory for weeks, each waiting for the other to make a move. And she definitely didn't know that her father had been dosing her with suppressants since birth to hide the fact that she wasn't beta at all. She was something far more dangerous, a tribond alpha, capable of mating two alphas and uniting entire packs. All she knew was that if she didn't lock up in the next 5 minutes, she'd miss the bank deadline to save her family's steakhouse. Then they walked in, one in white, one in black, and said in perfect unison, "Pour us both a drink, mate." The last customer had left an hour ago, a regular who'd nursed his bourbon and left a decent tip. Now it was just Cassie and the lingering smell of grilled steaks, charred onions, and the faint trace of whiskey that had soaked into the wooden bar over 30 years of service. She worked methodically, wiping down tables with practiced efficiency, her shoulders aching from 14 hours of seating guests, taking orders, running food, and managing a kitchen staff that was one cook short because she couldn't afford to replace him. The iron grill wasn't much, a corner steakhouse wedged between a yoga studio that had gone out of business and a tattoo parlor that never seemed to close. But it was hers in all the ways that mattered. She knew every booth, every scuff mark on the hardwood floor, every patron's usual order, and their stories. Her father had built this place from nothing, had turned it into neutral ground where pack politics stopped at the door. 2 years since his heart attack, and she still couldn't walk past the kitchen without expecting to see him there, sleeves rolled up, barking orders with that gruff affection that had made everyone love him. 21 days. That's all she had left before the bank took it all away. She was counting the cash register, fingers moving through bills by muscle memory, when she heard it. The soft click of the front door. Then another. 2 sets of footsteps, perfectly synchronized, moving across the floor with the kind of predatory grace that made every instinct she'd honed over 26 years of survival scream danger. Cassie's head snapped up. The corner booth, the one she'd wiped down 15 minutes ago, the one that sat in shadow even when every light was on, was occupied. 2 men sat across from each other, so still they might have been carved from stone, except for their eyes. Even from across the room, she could see them watching her. One in white, one in black. Her pulse kicked up. The door was locked. She'd checked it herself, sliding the deadbolt home with her own hands, flipping the sign to closed, pulling the shade. Which meant they'd been here the whole time. Sitting in silence while she cleaned. Watching while she worked. Impossible. "We're closed," Cassie said, keeping her voice steady even as her hand drifted toward the aluminum baseball bat her father had kept behind the bar. She'd dealt with enough drunk customers and aggressive wannabe pack enforcers to know that showing fear was the fastest way to become prey. "You need to leave. Now." Neither man moved. "Pour us both a drink, mate." They spoke in perfect unison, their voices layering over each other, one smooth and cultured, the other rough and primal, creating a harmonic that made something deep in her chest vibrate in response. Her breath caught. The man in white leaned forward slightly, and the overhead light finally found his face. He was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, all sharp cheekbones and aristocratic features, with dark hair styled just enough to look effortless and ice blue eyes that assessed her with the cold precision of a predator calculating the weakest point in his prey's defense. His white shirt was rolled at the sleeves, showing muscular forearms, and he wore wealth like a second skin. The man in black was his opposite in every way that mattered. Where the first was polished, this one was raw. Dark eyes that burned with barely leashed violence. Hair longer, wilder, falling across his forehead like he'd just rolled out of bed or off a battlefield. Black leather jacket over a dark shirt, tattoos visible at his collarbone and wrists, stubbled jaw that gave him the look of someone who'd forgotten civilization existed. He moved like violence wrapped in human skin. "Mate," Cassie repeated slowly, tasting the word. It sat heavy on her tongue, foreign and familiar at the same time. "I think you have the wrong person." "We don't," the man in white said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Trust me, Cassie. We've been looking for you for a very long time." The use of her name sent ice down her spine. "Who are you?" The man in white smiled, and it was a wolf smile, charming and deadly. "My name is Killian." Alpha of the Silver Raw Pack. He gestured to the man in black. This is Jax, Alpha of the Shadow Ridge Pack. Rival packs, Cassie said slowly, understanding dawning. You hate each other. Deeply, Jax agreed, his voice rough gravel. But his eyes never left her. But we agree on one thing. What's that? They spoke together again, that unsettling synchronization. You're ours. That's not possible, Cassie whispered. I'm Beta. I can't be anyone's mate. I don't even shift. You're not Beta, Killian said gently. You never were. Jax leaned forward. Your father gave you suppressants. Every morning, in those vitamins he insisted you take. He was protecting you. Her vision swam. The vitamin bottle. The one that had run out 3 days ago. The one she'd meant to refill but hadn't because money was tight and vitamins seemed less important than electricity. Protecting me from what? From being found, Killian said. You're Tribond Alpha, Cassie. You're capable of bonding with 2 alphas simultaneously. It makes you the most valuable and most dangerous wolf in the territory. Killian stood, moving with calculated grace. I can save your restaurant, Cassie. Pay off your debts, expand your territory, give you everything you need. All I ask is that you accept the bond. With me. He's offering you a cage, Jax growled, standing as well. The 2 alphas faced each other, territorial aggression thick enough to choke on. I'm offering you protection. Freedom. The choice to bond or not on your terms, not his. Get out. Her voice cut through their posturing, sharp and cold. Both of you. Get the hell out of my restaurant. She grabbed the bat. I don't care about your territorial games. I'm not about to become a trophy in your pissing contest. Killian's expression hardened. The suppressants are wearing off. In days, every wolf in the territory will scent what you are. And the pack council will come for you. They killed your father, Jax said quietly. 2 years ago. Made it look like a heart attack. But it was wolfsbane poisoning. The bat slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. You're lying. Check his medical records, Killian said. Your father knew. That's why he wrote those letters, called in those favors. After they left, and they did leave, though she couldn't remember agreeing to let them go, Cassie stood alone in the empty restaurant. Her hands trembled. Not from fear. From something else. Something that had been building since they'd said her name. She stumbled to the back office, pulled her father's old medical bag from storage, found the vitamin bottle. The label was worn but readable. Alpha suppressants. Take 1 daily. Do not stop without medical supervision. Empty. Cassie's reflection stared back at her from the office window. Same green eyes. Same freckles. Same exhausted woman who'd been working herself to death for 2 years. But as she watched, her eyes flickered, just for a second, to amber gold. Outside, on opposite sides of the street, 2 alphas watched and waited. One in white, one in black. And inside, something ancient and powerful and terrifying began to wake. Her skin prickled with awareness. She could smell them now, winter rain and expensive cologne from one direction, pine smoke and leather from the other. Both scents called to something primal inside her, something that wanted to answer. Cassie pressed her palm against the cool glass, staring at her reflection as her hand began to tremble with something that wasn't fear at all. It was hunger. Before we continue, take 2 seconds to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps me bring you more stories like this one, and I love hearing from you. Now, let's see what happens when Cassie's suppressants fully wear off and her true nature emerges. Cassie woke to sunlight that felt like knives piercing her skull. She threw her arm over her eyes with a groan, but it didn't help. Every sound was amplified. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs, traffic 3 blocks away, someone's heartbeat that couldn't possibly be hers because it was too loud, too fast, too everything. She sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it. The room spun, then snapped into focus with a clarity that was wrong. She could see individual dust motes floating in the morning light, could make out the grain in the wooden dresser across the room, could read the date on the calendar hanging on the opposite wall even though it should have been too far away. Her hands were shaking. No, not shaking, trembling with barely contained energy, like her body was a live wire and someone had just flipped the switch. When she gripped the edge of the mattress to steady herself, The wood frame creaked in protest, and she jerked back, staring at the indentations her fingers had left in the solid oak. What the hell was happening to her? The answer came with devastating clarity as her gaze landed on the empty amber bottle on her nightstand. The suppressants. 3 days without them, and her body was staging a revolt. Or maybe, and this thought sent ice through her veins, her body was finally telling the truth. Cassie stumbled to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under water so hot it should have scalded. Instead, it felt perfect. She could smell everything, the chemical tang of the shampoo, the mineral content of the water, and underneath it all, 2 distinct scents that had somehow imprinted themselves on her skin. Winter rain and leather. Cologne and pine smoke. Killian and Jax. She was out of the shower and dressed before she consciously decided to move, her body operating on autopilot while her mind raced. Her father's office. If there were answers, they'd be there. The office had been locked since his death. She'd told herself it was too painful to go through his things, but now she wondered if some part of her had known. Had been afraid of what she'd find. The journal was in the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden beneath tax returns and vendor invoices. Leather-bound, worn at the edges, filled with her father's cramped handwriting. The first entry was dated 26 years ago, 3 days after her birth. She's beautiful, perfect, and damned. The bloodline test came back positive. My daughter is tribond alpha. God help us all. Cassie's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Her father's words painted a picture she'd never imagined, a world of pack politics and ancient prophecies, of power and danger, and a daughter he'd tried desperately to protect. The council knows. They came today with their congratulations and their thinly veiled threats. They want her bloodline documented, controlled. They want to own her future. I won't let them. Dr. Matthews has agreed to provide suppressants. As long as Cassie doesn't know what she is, she can't be used as a pawn in their games. The prophecy was tucked between the pages, written in faded ink on parchment so old it crumbled at the edges. Tribond alphas appeared once every century, capable of accepting mate bonds from 2 alphas simultaneously. They were bridges between warring factions, capable of uniting divided packs under a single rule. They were also threats to established power structures, which was why the council had been quietly eliminating them for generations. The final entry was dated 2 years ago, days before her father's death. They know I've been hiding her. I can see it in their eyes when they come to the restaurant. They're waiting for me to slip up, to give them an excuse. I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me, Cassie will have protection. Killian Thorne has been asking questions. The Silvera Alpha is sharper than his father ever was. And Jax, the exiled one, watches from the shadows. They'll feel the pull when the suppressants wear off. They'll come for her. God, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope she can forgive me for the lies. The last line was smudged, as if he'd been crying when he wrote it. The council put wolfsbane in my food tonight. I can feel it working. By the time anyone reads this, I'll be gone. Cassie, baby girl, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you're stronger than you know. Trust the bond. Trust yourself. The journal slipped from Cassie's fingers. Her father hadn't died of a heart attack. He'd been murdered. Poisoned because he'd protected her, because he'd refused to let the council turn his daughter into a political tool. She was still sitting there, numb with grief and rage, when the bell over the restaurant door chimed. She hadn't unlocked it. Hadn't even come downstairs. But somehow, she knew who it was before she heard his voice. Cassie. Killian stood in the doorway of the office, looking immaculate in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt despite the early hour. We need to talk. About how you've been stalking me for weeks? Her voice came out harsh, aggressive in a way that shocked her. Or about how my father was murdered and you didn't bother to mention it last night? I didn't know for certain until he stopped as another presence filled the restaurant. Jax appeared behind him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You knew, Jax said, his voice dangerous and low. You've known for months that the council was involved. I had suspicions, Killian corrected, not backing down despite the threat radiating from the other alpha. But no proof. And accusing the council without evidence is suicide. So you just let her walk around unprotected? Jax moved forward, and suddenly the two alphas were chest to chest, dominance rolling off them in waves. She could have been killed, and you were too busy playing your political games to. Enough. The word ripped from Cassie's throat before she could stop it, and it wasn't her voice. It was command, pure and absolute, laced with power that made the air itself vibrate. Both alphas froze mid-argument, their eyes going wide as they turned to stare at her. She stood in the office doorway, and she could feel it now, the thing that had been waking inside her since the suppressants wore off. Alpha nature, raw and undeniable, demanding submission from the two most powerful wolves in the territory. And they gave it. Both of them took a step back, heads tilting fractionally in acknowledgement of her dominance. The shock on their faces would have been funny if Cassie wasn't too busy trying not to hyperventilate. What? She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. What just happened? You just made two alphas bow, Jax said, and there was something like reverence in his voice. No one does that. No one except another alpha, Killian finished. He was watching her with new intensity, blue eyes calculating. The tri-bond is real. You're not just capable of accepting our bonds. You're strong enough to balance us. I don't want to balance you, Cassie snapped, but even she could hear how her voice wavered. I want answers. I want to know who killed my father. I want. Her knees buckled. Jax caught her before she hit the ground, his arms surprisingly gentle as he eased her into the office chair. She could smell pine smoke and leather, could feel the heat of him through her clothes, and her traitorous body wanted to lean into that warmth. The awakening is hard, he said quietly. Your body is adjusting to power it's never had to handle before. You need rest, food, and you need to decide what you're going to do, because once the council realizes the suppressants have worn off, they'll come for her, Killian finished. He crouched in front of the chair, bringing himself to eye level. I can offer you protection, Cassie. A formal courtship. My pack's resources. We'll find the evidence to prove the council killed your father, and we'll make them pay. And what do you get out of it? She forced herself to meet his eyes. Don't pretend this is charity. His smile was sharp. The tri-bond would unite our territories. End decades of conflict. And yes, it would give me a political advantage. But I'm offering you a partnership, not ownership. He's offering you a gilded cage, Jax countered. I can protect you without the strings attached. No political marriages, no territory negotiations. Just protection. Protection I can't pay for, Cassie said bitterly. I'm not asking for payment. Jax's dark eyes were intense. The council will come for you whether you bond with him, with me, or with neither of us. But if you bond with both. He trailed off, glancing at Killian with something that might have been grudging respect. The prophecy says tri-bond alphas can't be controlled. Can't be killed. The mate bond with two alphas makes you untouchable. Cassie looked between them, polished Killian with his business propositions and strategic mind, dangerous Jax with his brutal honesty and protective fury. Two alphas who should have been tearing each other apart, but who were instead offering her something impossible. A choice. Power. Survival. She pulled her father's journal back into her lap, opening it to the final page where he'd sketched diagrams of the tri-bond. 3 wolves, 3 souls, perfectly balanced. If I accept both of you, she said slowly, what happens to my restaurant? My life? Me? You become more than you were, Killian said. Not less. Cassie closed her eyes and felt the truth of it humming in her bones. The suppressants were gone. The lies were over. And she was so tired of being afraid. Then I guess we'd better figure out how this works, she said, before the council figures out I'm awake. The gifts started the next morning. Cassie arrived at the restaurant to find her meat supplier's overdue invoice stamped paid in full, along with a case of premium dry-aged steaks she couldn't have afforded in a year. The card was simple, expensive cardstock with 2 words in elegant script, consider it. K. She was still staring at the steaks when she noticed the second gift. Not something you could hold, but something you could feel, the prickling awareness of being watched. Protected. She counted 3 of Jax's wolves positioned around the block, dressed like regular pedestrians, but moving with predatory awareness that marked them as Shadowridge pack. The war for her had begun, and neither alpha was playing fair. Killian courted her like a campaign, strategic and overwhelming. He paid her remaining vendor bills without asking permission, had premium ingredients delivered daily, sent his own contractors to fix the leaking roof she'd been ignoring for months. When she tried to refuse, he showed up at closing with that devastating smile and an invitation to dinner that was phrased like a business proposition. "Just hear me out," he'd said, those ice blue eyes seeing right through her protests. "One meal. Let me show you what a partnership could look like." The rooftop restaurant overlooked the entire city, glass and steel and soft lighting that made everything feel possible. Killian across from her in a tailored suit, no tie, top button undone just enough to remind her he was a wolf under all that civilization. He talked about territory expansion and profit margins, made her restaurant sound like an empire waiting to be built, and somehow made business negotiations feel like foreplay. "You're good at this," Cassie said, watching him over her wine glass. The smooth operator routine. "Does it usually work?" His smile sharpened. "I'm not operating, Cassie. I'm negotiating. There's a difference. You have something I need, the tri-bond, neutral territory, leverage against the council. I have something you need, resources, protection, the power to make your restaurant everything your father wanted it to be." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "But more than that, I want you to choose this. Choose me. Not because you're trapped, but because together, we'd be unstoppable." The air between them crackled with possibility, with the slow burn heat of two minds recognizing an equal match. Jax's courtship was entirely different, raw, honest, and utterly overwhelming. He showed up the next night and didn't ask, just stated, "Come with me." She should have refused. Instead, she found herself in his truck driving toward the mountains, city lights fading behind them. He took her to Pac Land, to forests so deep and wild she could barely remember what civilization felt like. And then he shifted, massive black wolf with burning gold eyes, and waited. Her wolf rose to meet his, breaking free for the second time with less pain and more eagerness. They ran together through moonlit forest, and Cassie felt something she'd never experienced, complete freedom. No restaurant to save, no bills to pay, no council hunting her. Just primal joy and the intoxicating presence of an alpha who matched her stride for stride. When they shifted back, human and breathless and tangled together in the darkness, Jax's voice was rough. "This is what you're meant to be. Not some restaurant owner pretending to be human. You're alpha, Cassie. Wild and powerful and perfect exactly as you are." His kiss was nothing like Killian's calculated seduction. It was raw need and honest hunger, and Cassie kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. The problem was that both of them were right. With Killian, she felt sharp, strategic, like her mind was finally working at full capacity. He brought out the part of her that wanted to build empires, to turn her father's struggling restaurant into something legendary. With Jax, she felt alive, connected to the wolf inside her that had been caged for too long. He brought out instinct and power she hadn't known she possessed. She wanted both. And the guilt of that wanting was eating her alive. The restaurant became neutral ground by unspoken agreement, though the tension was thick enough to choke on. Killian's wolves and Jax's pack members eyed each other with barely concealed hostility whenever both alphas showed up at the same time. Which was often, because neither was willing to give the other an advantage. They sabotaged each other with petty ruthlessness. Killian's assistant called to cancel deliveries Jax had arranged. Jax's wolves scared off business contacts Killian had invited for meetings. It would have been funny if Cassie wasn't caught in the middle, trying to run a restaurant while two alpha wolves staged a territorial war around her. "This is ridiculous," she snapped after finding out Killian had bought the building her restaurant occupied just to prevent Jax from doing the same. "You're acting like children." "I'm acting like an alpha protecting what's mine," Killian said coolly. "She's not yours," Jax growled from across the dining room where he'd been brooding for the past hour. "She's not anyone's." "Actually," Cassie said, voice sharp with command that made both of them straighten involuntarily, "I'm my own. And if you two can't figure out how to share the same space without pissing all over everything, you can both leave." They glared at each other but stayed silent. Small victories. She was driving home that night, exhausted and confused and angry at herself for wanting what she couldn't have, when her brakes failed. The car hit the intersection doing 40, ran the red light, and slammed into a telephone pole with a crunch of metal that should have killed her. But her alpha healing was already kicking in, bones knitting even as airbag powder filled her lungs. Two vehicles screeched to a stop simultaneously, a sleek black sedan and a battered truck. Killian and Jax reached her at the same moment, both of them ripping the driver's door off its hinges like it was paper. "Don't move," Killian ordered, hands gentle as they checked her for injuries, blue eyes blazing with fury and fear. "Like hell," Jax snarled, already on his phone. Someone cut her brake lines. This wasn't an accident. In the hospital, with both alphas hovering over her bed like rival guard dogs, Cassie felt it. The bond not complete, but there, undeniable as gravity. It snapped into place between the three of them like an invisible thread, pulling taut with recognition. Killian felt it too. She saw his eyes widen, saw him reach for the wall to steady himself. Jax's breath caught, his hand finding hers and gripping tight. "Holy shit." "The partial bond," Cassie whispered, understanding flooding through her. The tri-bond wasn't just theory anymore. It was real, forming whether she was ready or not, pulling the three of them together with terrifying inevitability. "Someone tried to kill you tonight," Killian said, his voice deadly calm. "Someone who knows what you are." "The council," Jax added. "They're not going to wait for you to choose. They're going to eliminate the threat." Cassie looked between them, sophisticated Killian with his strategic mind already planning their defense, dangerous Jax with protective fury radiating from every line of his body. Two alphas who hated each other, but who'd both dropped everything to save her. She needed them both. Not wanted, needed. Because someone was hunting her and alone, she wouldn't survive. "Then I guess," she said, squeezing Jax's hand while meeting Killian's eyes, "you two better figure out how to work together." The partial bond hummed between them, fragile and new and absolutely terrifying. And somewhere in the city, the council was already planning their next move. The autopsy report was clinical in its precision. Cardiac arrest due to acute myocardial infarction. Natural causes. Case closed. But tucked in the back of her father's medical files, Cassie found what the coroner had missed or been paid to ignore. Toxicology results showing trace amounts of aconitum, better known as wolfsbane. Not enough to raise red flags in a human autopsy, but more than enough to stop a werewolf's heart. Her father hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been murdered, slowly poisoned over weeks until his body finally gave out. And she'd spent 2 years believing it was her fault, that the stress of the failing restaurant had killed him. The paper slipped from her fingers as the truth crashed over her. Someone had looked her father in the eye, shaken his hand, eaten at his table, and fed him poison. Someone on the council, the same people who were now hunting her. The grief hit like a physical blow, doubling her over in the chair. She'd been holding it together for 2 years, shoving down the pain to focus on survival, on saving the restaurant, on being strong enough to carry his legacy. But now, knowing he'd been murdered, knowing he'd died protecting her secret, the dam broke. She didn't hear Killian arrive, didn't realize he was there until strong arms pulled her up from the chair and against a solid chest. "I've got you," he murmured, voice stripped of its usual polish. "Let it out, Cassie. I've got you." She shattered in his arms, sobbing like she hadn't since she was 8 years old and her mother had left. Killian held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, the other pressed against her back, anchoring her while the storm raged. He didn't offer empty platitudes, didn't tell her it would be okay. He just held on. "My parents were killed in a pack war when I was 16, he said quietly, once her sobs had faded to hiccups. Rival Alpha wanted our territory, decided the easiest way was to eliminate the leadership. They died protecting our pack's retreat." His jaw tightened. "I know that rage you're feeling. That need for justice. And I promise you, Cassie, the ones who killed your father will answer for it." The door slammed open. Jack stood in the doorway, took one look at her tear-stained face, and crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't ask permission, just pulled her from Killian's arms into his own, and, surprisingly, Killian let him. "Who do I kill?" Jax's voice was flat, deadly serious. The council, Cassie managed, her voice raw. They poisoned him. Wolfsbane in his food for weeks. Jax's arms tightened around her, and she felt the rumble of a growl building in his chest. Then we hunt them. Track them down one by one and make them pay. That's not justice, Killian said sharply. That's vengeance. What's wrong with vengeance? Jax shot back. Nothing, Killian admitted, surprising them both. But we do this smart. We gather evidence, expose them publicly, destroy their power base before we destroy them. Otherwise, we're just starting another war. Cassie pulled back, looking between them. You're actually agreeing on something. Don't get used to it, Jax muttered, but his hand found hers and squeezed. They spent the next 3 days building their case. Killian used his business contacts to trace financial records. Jax called in favors from wolves who'd been exiled for asking too many questions. And Cassie dove into her father's journals, piecing together 2 decades of careful documentation. The council had been hunting tribond alphas for generations, eliminating them before they could unite rival packs and disrupt the profitable status quo of endless territorial conflicts. Her father had known, had kept records, had been building evidence for years. Evidence that died with him. Until now. They were at the restaurant going over the files when the windows exploded inward. Cassie hit the ground on instinct, glass raining down around her as gunfire tore through the dining room. She caught a glimpse of tactical gear, council enforcers, at least 6 of them advancing with military precision. Down! Killian shouted, already moving to intercept. But something inside Cassie snapped. Not fear, fury. Raw, primal rage at these people who'd killed her father, who were now destroying his restaurant, who thought they could just eliminate her like she was a problem to be solved. The wolf erupted from her skin before she could think, before she could be afraid. One moment she was human, the next she was silver fur and fangs and power that burned through her veins like lightning. She didn't know how to control it, didn't know what she was doing, but her wolf knew. The lead enforcer barely had time to scream before she was on him, massive jaws closing around the rifle and crushing it like a toy. She was bigger than she should be, stronger, her alpha nature fully unleashed for the first time. 2 more wolves flanked her, one sleek platinum with ice blue eyes, one massive midnight black with burning gold. Killian and Jax, shifted and deadly, protecting her flanks while she learned to move in this new skin. The enforcers retreated, firing wildly, but the 3 wolves moved like water, like they'd been hunting together for years instead of minutes. The partial bond sang between them, sharing instinct and intention without words. Cassie felt Killian's strategic mind guiding their movements, felt Jax's protective fury fueling her own. And then they were running. Out the shattered doors, through the streets, scattering the enforcers who couldn't keep up with 3 alphas in full flight. The city blurred past, alleys and rooftops, and finally open road leading to mountains. Cassie had never felt anything like this. Freedom and power and joy so pure it hurt. Her wolf reveled in the strength of her body, in the wind in her fur, in the presence of 2 alphas running beside her in perfect synchronization. Miles vanished beneath their paws, city giving way to wilderness, until finally they collapsed together in a moonlit clearing. The shift back to human was easier this time, though it left her naked and breathless and tangled between 2 equally naked, equally breathless alphas. For a moment, nobody moved. They just lay there in a heap of limbs and racing hearts, the bond between them blazing like a live wire. That was... Cassie couldn't find words. Incredible, Killian finished, his hand somehow intertwined with hers. Terrifying, Jax added from her other side, but he was grinning. Cassie could feel them now, really feel them. Killian's satisfaction at how well they'd worked together, his fierce protectiveness wrapped in strategic planning. Jax's pride in her strength, his own protective instincts singing harmony with Killian's despite himself. The bond is getting stronger, she whispered. I know. Killian sat up slowly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. He looked at Jax, something passing between them that might have been understanding. We can't keep dancing around this. The tri-bond wants to complete. The council won't stop, Jax said, his usual antagonism toward Killian muted. Tonight proved that. They're escalating. As if summoned by his words, Killian's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went cold. Message from the council. They want Cassie to surrender herself for questioning about illegal alpha activities. If she doesn't comply within 48 hours, they'll consider everyone at the restaurant complicit in harboring a dangerous wolf. They're threatening my staff, Cassie said, rage building again. My people who have nothing to do with this. They're forcing your hand, Killian corrected. Trying to make you act rashly. Or trying to isolate her, Jax added. Take away her safe spaces, her support system, until she has nowhere to run. Cassie looked between them, sophisticated Killian, still analyzing even when covered in dirt and scratches. Dangerous Jax, still protective even when facing his former pack brother. Two alphas who should hate each other, but who'd just fought beside her like they'd been pack for years. The partial bond hummed between them, stronger now after the run, after fighting together, after being vulnerable together. She could feel their determination, their fear for her, their growing acceptance that this, the three of them together, might be the only way forward. I'm not running, Cassie said, voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. And I'm not surrendering. But I can't fight them like this, half-bonded and still figuring out how to be a wolf. Then we complete the bond, Killian said quietly. Full tri-bond. Tonight. You don't know what you're asking, Jax warned. The tri-bond is permanent. There's no going back. I know exactly what I'm asking. Killian's ice blue eyes met Cassie's. The question is whether you're ready. Cassie thought about her father, murdered for protecting her. About her restaurant, built on neutral ground that could unite territories. About the power she'd felt tonight, running with two alphas who made her stronger instead of weaker. Tell me how it works, she said. And then let's end this war. They stood there, former pack brothers facing each other across 3 years of hurt and misunderstanding. Then Killian extended his hand, the formal gesture of pack reconciliation. Jax gripped it, pulled Killian into a brief, fierce embrace. Don't make me regret this. Wouldn't dream of it. Cassie felt the tri-bond surge as they reconciled, the partial connection solidifying into something stronger. She could feel both of them more clearly now, Killian's strategic mind already planning how to use this information, Jax's protective instincts settling now that old wounds were being addressed. So we're agreed, she said. The council is the real enemy. They've been manipulating everyone, profiting from pack conflicts while eliminating anyone who could unite the territories. Including your father, Killian added gently. And now you, Jax finished. Cassie's phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the message made her blood run cold. The Iron Grill is such a lovely establishment. It would be a shame if something happened to it. Surrender yourself by midnight, or we'll burn your father's legacy to ash. She was already moving toward the door when Killian caught her arm. It's a trap. I don't care. Her wolf was rising, fury making her eyes flash gold. That restaurant is all I have left of him. Then we go together, Jax said, already shifting into tactical mode. Fast extraction, get your staff out, salvage what we can. They were 20 minutes too late. The Iron Grill was already burning when they arrived, flames consuming the building her father had spent 30 years building. Fire trucks were on scene, but the blaze was too far gone. Cassie stood on the sidewalk and watched her entire world turn to ash. She felt Killian's hand find hers, solid and steady. Felt Jax move to her other side, a wall of protective fury. But it didn't help. Nothing helped. The restaurant was gone. Her father's legacy, her livelihood, the neutral ground he died protecting, all of it reduced to smoke and ruin. We'll rebuild, Killian said quietly. I'll cover the costs, hire the best. It won't be the same. Her voice was hollow. It won't be his. No, Jax agreed. But it'll be yours. And it'll be better. Stronger. A real neutral ground, not just a restaurant, but a symbol of what the tri-bond can accomplish. Cassie watched the flames and felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there, still raw and terrible. But underneath it, burning just as hot, was rage. Not the helpless fury of the past few days, but cold, calculated determination. The council had taken her father. Had manipulated Killian and Jax into destroying their brotherhood. had murdered families, orchestrated wars, all to maintain their corrupt power. And now they'd burned down the last piece of her old life, thinking it would break her. They were wrong. "We complete the tri-bond tonight," she said, voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Full bond, no more half measures. And then we don't just defend against the council, we destroy them. Expose every crime, every manipulation, every murder. We tear down their power structure and make sure they never hurt anyone again." "That's a declaration of war," Killian warned. "Good." Cassie's eyes blazed gold in the firelight. "Let them come. This time, we'll be ready." The partial bond hummed between the three of them, stronger now with Killian and Jax's reconciliation, ready to complete into something the council had feared for generations. A tri-bond alpha, backed by two of the most powerful alphas in the territory, coming for justice. The council had made their move. Now it was Cassie's turn. Chapter 6, The Bonding Decision. They returned to Killian's penthouse in silence, the smell of smoke still clinging to their clothes. Cassie stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city lights while two alphas waited for her decision. She could feel them through the partial bond, Killian's controlled concern, Jax's protective fury, both of them ready to give her whatever she needed. She turned to face them. "I want the tri-bond. Full completion. Tonight." Killian's expression didn't change, but she felt his surge of satisfaction through the bond. Jax just nodded, like he'd been waiting for her to catch up to what he'd known all along. "But on my terms," Cassie continued, voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm not doing this to be protected or possessed or turned into some political tool. If we complete this bond, I'm co-alpha. Equal authority in both packs. Equal say in every decision. I won't be a mate who stands behind her alphas, I'll stand beside them." The silence stretched. Killian's jaw tightened, and she felt his internal struggle through the bond. He was an alpha who'd ruled alone for years, who'd built an empire on absolute control. Sharing power went against every instinct he had. "That's not how pack hierarchy typically works," he said carefully. "I don't care about typical." Cassie crossed her arms, alpha power radiating from her. "The prophecy says tri-bond alphas unite warring packs. That doesn't happen if I'm just another possession to fight over. It happens if I'm strong enough to balance both of you, to bridge your territories as an equal, not a subordinate." "She's right," Jax said quietly. "The old texts say tri-bond alphas don't submit, they unify. 3 alphas, 3 equals, 1 bond." Killian ran a hand through his hair, the gesture uncharacteristically uncertain. "You're asking me to share control of my pack with someone who's been alpha for all of 2 weeks. "I'm asking you to trust me," Cassie corrected. "To believe that together, we're stronger than any of us alone. But if you can't do that, if you need a mate who'll obey without question, then this won't work." She felt his conflict, pride warring with pragmatism, control fighting against the bone-deep certainty that she was right. Finally, he met her eyes. "If I lose you because I'm too stubborn to share power, I lose everything. So yes, co-alpha. Equal authority. But you have to actually learn how to lead a pack, which means letting me teach you. I can live with that." "Good." Jax moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "Because I've never wanted a submissive mate. I've always wanted a partner who could match me, challenge me, make me better. You're already that, Cassie. The bond will just make it official." The certainty in his voice made her chest tight. "You make it sound easy." "It won't be," Killian said bluntly. "The tri-bond ritual is intense. It'll require complete vulnerability from all 3 of us, mental, emotional, physical. And once it's done, there's no undoing it. We'll be bound for life." "I know." Cassie took a breath. "So teach me what I need to know." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Killian took her to his penthouse, spread maps and financial reports across his desk, and taught her the intricate politics of pack leadership. They talked strategy late into the night, debating territory boundaries and alliance structures, and somewhere between the business negotiations and the whiskey, his hand found hers. "You're brilliant at this," he murmured, ice blue eyes warm in the lamplight. "The way your mind works, seeing angles I miss. We're going to build something incredible together." When he kissed her, it was slow and deliberate, a promise of partnership wrapped in desire. Cassie kissed him back, feeling the intellectual connection they'd built deepen into something more. Jax took her to the mountains, taught her to fight with claws and fangs, pushed her wolf until she was faster, stronger, deadlier. They sparred in human form and wolf, and when she finally managed to pin him, he looked up at her with fierce pride. "You're not holding back anymore," he said, breathing hard. "That's my girl." His kiss was different from Killian's, raw and hungry and honest. But it felt just as right. The night of the full moon, they returned to the ruins of the Iron Grill. The ground had been cleared, revealing ancient stones underneath. A ritual circle her father must have known was there, neutral ground in the truest sense. Cassie stood in the center, barefoot in a simple white dress, heart pounding as Killian and Jax took their positions on either side. Both wore ritual markings, old pack symbols painted across bare chests, and the sight of them made her mouth go dry. "The tri-bond requires complete honesty," Killian said, his voice formal. "No walls, no shields. We offer ourselves fully and accept what's offered in return." "I'm ready," Cassie said. They began the ritual, ancient words in a language that hummed in her bones. Killian claimed her first, his hand over her heart, ice blue eyes blazing as he opened himself completely through the bond. She felt his fierce intelligence, his protective instincts, his fear of losing control, and underneath it all, his absolute certainty that she was worth the risk. Then Jax, his hand joining Killian's, dark eyes burning gold. His emotions crashed over her, loyalty and passion, and the bone-deep need to protect what was his. But also trust, the kind he'd thought he'd lost when Killian exiled him, now being offered to her without reservation. Cassie placed her hands over theirs, opened herself completely, let them feel her fear and determination and the love she'd been fighting since the night they'd walked into her restaurant. The bond snapped into place like lightning striking earth. Power exploded through her, not just her own alpha nature, but theirs too, amplified and reflected and transformed into something unprecedented. She could feel Killian's thoughts brushing against hers, could sense Jax's emotions as clearly as her own. They were separate but connected, three souls bound by choice and magic and love. Golden light erupted from the circle, and Cassie threw her head back as her alpha nature fully awakened. She was more than she'd been, stronger, capable of feats that should have been impossible. The tri-bond alpha the council had feared for generations, finally complete. Then the gunfire started. Council enforcers poured from the surrounding buildings, at least 20 of them, armed and organized. They'd been waiting for the ritual, for the moment when all three alphas would be vulnerable. But the tri-bond made them anything but vulnerable. Cassie moved on instinct, golden energy crackling around her hands as she threw up a shield that deflected bullets like rain. Killian shifted partially, claws extending as he moved with lethal precision to her left. Jax went full wolf on her right, massive and devastating. They fought like they'd been doing it for years instead of minutes. Cassie felt Killian's tactical mind directing their movements, felt Jax's protective fury fueling their attacks, and added her own power to create something unstoppable. The bond let them communicate without words, coordinate perfectly, cover each other's weaknesses. An enforcer got too close. Cassie's claws, when had they extended, tore through his armor like paper. Another aimed at Killian's back. Jax was there before the trigger pulled, jaws crushing the rifle. They moved as one organism, three parts of a perfect whole. Within minutes, the enforcers were retreating, dragging their wounded. The council leaders who'd orchestrated the attack were already gone, too cowardly to face the tri-bond themselves. Cassie stood in the center of the ritual circle, flanked by her mates, and felt invincible. The bond hummed between them, strong and true and absolutely terrifying in its completeness. "They'll come again," Killian said, wiping blood from his mouth. "Let them," Jax growled. Cassie looked at the ruins of her father's restaurant, at the city spreading before them, at the two alphas who'd become hers just as surely as she'd become theirs. "The council wanted to prevent the tri-bond because they knew what it meant," she said quietly. "An end to their manipulation. An end to pack wars that keep them in power. An end to their reign." She felt both alphas' fierce agreement through the bond. So we give them exactly what they fear, Cassie continued. We unite the territories, expose their crimes, and we build something better from the ashes. The tri-bond was complete. The real war was just beginning. And this time, they would win. Waking up between two alphas was something Cassie thought she'd never get used to. Killian on her left, all lean muscle and controlled breathing even in sleep. Jax on her right, one heavy arm draped across her waist, radiating heat. The tri-bond hummed contentedly between them, a constant awareness of their emotions and proximity that should have been overwhelming, but instead felt like coming home. She could feel Killian stirring awake, his mind already shifting into strategic mode. Could sense Jax's protective instincts activating the moment he registered she was conscious. Being bonded to two alphas meant never being alone in her own head, and she was still learning whether that was a blessing or a curse. Stop overthinking, Jax mumbled against her shoulder. I can feel your anxiety from here. That's going to take some getting used to, she admitted. Killian's eyes opened, ice blue and sharp despite the early hour. The bond settles over time. Eventually, you'll be able to maintain privacy when you need it. But for now, we're all broadcasting pretty loudly. What am I broadcasting right now? His smile was slow and dangerous. That you're wondering if this was a mistake. If you can actually handle being mated to both of us. If the Pax will ever accept it. He rolled toward her, one hand cupping her face. And underneath all that fear is absolute certainty that this is exactly where you're supposed to be. Damn the bond for making her transparent. The Pack's reactions to the tri-bond were as divided as expected. The younger wolves, the ones who'd grown up tired of territorial conflicts and pointless pack wars, embraced it with enthusiasm. Cassie watched Silverpaw and Shadowridge wolves training together in the courtyard, sharing techniques and stories, building bridges that had seemed impossible a week ago. But the traditionalists were another matter. Older wolves who remembered when pack lines were absolute, when the idea of an alpha sharing power was blasphemy. And worse, the council loyalists who understood exactly what the tri-bond meant for their corrupt power structure. We need to force their hand, Cassie said, studying the city map spread across Killian's conference table. Make them act publicly where we can expose them. You want to use yourself as bait, Killian said flatly. Absolutely not. It's the smart play, Jax argued, surprising them both by agreeing with her. The council wants her dead, but they want it done quietly. If we announce the tri-bond publicly, invite all the packs, they'll have to either accept it or reveal themselves by attacking. And when they attack? Killian's jaw was tight. Because they will, and you know it. Then we're ready. Cassie met his eyes. We have evidence of their crimes. Financial records showing decades of profiteering from pack conflicts. Testimony from wolves they've silenced. My father's documentation of tri-bond alpha murders. We expose everything in front of the entire pack community. Killian stood, pacing to the windows. She felt his conflict through the bond. The strategic part of him recognized her plan's merit, but the part that was her mate wanted to lock her in a fortress until the threat was eliminated. I've been tracking their assets, he said finally. Council members have been funneling money through shell corporations, funding both sides of territorial conflicts to keep the wars going. If we freeze their accounts, cut off their resources before the announcement. They'll be desperate, Jax finished. Desperate enemies make mistakes. Or desperate enemies go for the throat. Killian turned back to them. If we do this, we need to be prepared for all-out war. Cassie felt the weight of what they were planning settle over her. Then we combine both approaches. Killian handles the financial warfare, cuts off their power base. Jax coordinates security, makes sure we control the physical space. And I make the announcement, force them to show their hand in front of witnesses they can intimidate or eliminate. You're asking them to commit treason publicly, Killian said. I'm giving them rope to hang themselves with, Cassie corrected. The prophecy says tri-bond alphas end the blood cycle. That doesn't just mean uniting two packs, it means destroying the system that profits from keeping us divided. Through the bond, she felt both alphas' fierce pride mixed with terror at the risk she was taking. The announcement went out the next day, a public tri-bond ceremony at the ruins of the Iron Grill, open to all packs, to be followed by the groundbreaking for the tri-bond steakhouse. The message was clear. The old neutral ground was being rebuilt as a symbol of permanent unity between Silver Paw and Shadow Ridge territories. Construction began immediately. Cassie stood at the building site, watching wolves from both packs work side by side, raising steel beams and pouring foundations. A young Silverpaw wolf was teaching a Shadow Ridge crew proper welding technique. Two older wolves who'd been enemies for decades were sharing coffee and debating the best way to install the ventilation system. "Your father would be proud," Jax said quietly, appearing at her shoulder. "He'd be terrified," Cassie admitted. "But yeah, maybe proud too." Killian joined them, tablet in hand. "The council's accounts are frozen. They're trying to move assets through secondary channels, but we're blocking those too. They're running out of options, which means they'll make their move at the ceremony," Cassie finished. That night, alone with her thoughts for the first time in days, the Alphas were handling security preparations. Cassie found herself in Killian's library, reading the ancient texts about Tribond Alphas. The prophecy was more detailed than she'd realized. "You're spiraling." Killian's voice came from the doorway. "I can feel it through the bond. What if I'm not what the prophecy needs?" The words came out small, vulnerable. "What if I'm just a woman who's good at running a restaurant and happens to have a genetic anomaly?" He crossed the room, pulled her up from the chair and into his arms. "You're the woman who faced down two rival alphas and made them work together. Who survived assassination attempts and came out fighting. Who lost everything and decided to build something better from the ashes." His hand tilted her chin up. "The prophecy doesn't need you to be perfect, Cassie. It needs you to be exactly who you are." Jax appeared in the doorway, must have felt her distress through the bond. "He's right. You're not carrying this weight alone anymore. That's what the Tribond means. We share the burden, the responsibility, the risk. And the reward," Killian added, pressing a kiss to her temple. Cassie let herself lean into them, feeling the bond wrap around all three of them like a protective shield. "The ceremony is tomorrow." "I know." Jax's arms came around both of them. "And whatever happens, we face it together." She felt their absolute certainty through the bond, their unwavering belief in her, in them, in what they were building. The fear was still there. She'd be an idiot not to be afraid, but underneath it was something stronger. Trust. In herself, in her mates, in the bond that made them more than the sum of their parts. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The ruins of the Iron Grill had been transformed, a temporary platform built over the ritual circle, seating for hundreds of pack members, security checkpoints managed by wolves from both Silver Paw and Shadow Ridge. Cassie stood in the makeshift preparation area, adjusting the formal outfit Killian's people had provided. Not a wedding dress. This wasn't a wedding. It was a declaration of war wrapped in a ceremony. "They'll be here," she said to her reflection. "The council. They can't afford to let this happen." "We know." Killian appeared behind her, devastating in formal pack regalia that somehow made him look even more dangerous. "We're ready." Jax entered from the other door, equally formal but radiating barely leashed violence. "Security teams are in position. Every exit is covered. If they try anything, we'll have them." Cassie turned to face them both, her mates, her partners, her equals. The bond hummed between them, strong and steady and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Let's end this," she said. The ceremony was about to begin. The council's trap was set. But so was theirs. And this time, the Tribond would finish what generations of corrupted leadership had started. One way or another, the blood cycle ended today. The gathering ground was packed. Hundreds of wolves from every pack in the region, drawn by curiosity or loyalty or the simple desire to witness history. Cassie stood backstage, feeling the weight of all those eyes even though they couldn't see her yet. Through the bond, she felt Killian's calm strategic assessment of the crowd and Jax's coiled readiness for violence. "They're here," Killian murmured, nodding toward the VIP section where the council sat in their formal robes, faces arranged in expressions of benevolent authority. Behind them, trying to blend with the crowd but failing spectacularly, were at least 30 enforcers in tactical gear. "Good," Cassie said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Let them watch." She walked onto the platform, and the crowd fell silent. Two alphas flanked her, Killian in silver and white, Jax in black leather, and the visual impact was exactly what they'd planned. "Thank you for coming," Cassie began, her voice amplified by the sound system Killian's people had installed. "I know many of you are here out of curiosity. A tribond alpha is rare, appears maybe once a century. Most of you probably thought it was just a legend." She gestured to Killian and Jax. "But here we are. 3 alphas fully bonded, united in purpose. And I'm not here today to ask for your acceptance of that bond. I'm here to tell you the truth about why tribond alphas are so rare." The council members shifted in their seats. She felt their unease through the heightened senses the bond provided. For generations, the Pack Council has been systematically eliminating tribond bloodlines, Cassie continued. "Not because we're dangerous to regular wolves, but because we're dangerous to them. To their power structure. To the profitable status quo of endless territorial wars." "This is outrageous," Council Elder Marcus stood, face red with fury. "Is it?" Cassie pulled out her father's journal, held it high. "This belonged to my father, Marcus Cole. You remember him, the man you had poisoned with wolfsbane 2 years ago because he refused to hand over his tribond daughter to your control." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus sputtered, "Your father died of natural causes, a heart attack, induced by wolfsbane poisoning over a period of 3 weeks. Killian stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We have the original toxicology reports that you paid the coroner to bury. We have financial records showing the payments. We have testimony from the doctor who provided the poison. We also have documentation of 19 other tribond alphas eliminated over the past century," Jax added, his voice carrying deadly intent. "Including the Cole family, a man, his pregnant wife, and their 2 children, murdered in a house fire you ordered when you suspected tribond bloodline." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Council members were on their feet now, faces twisted with rage and fear. "You have no authority to make these accusations," Elder Sophia shrieked. "You're a mongrel abomination, bonded to 2 alphas like some kind of tribond alpha," Cassie interrupted calmly. "Which according to ancient pack law, gives me authority equal to any council elder. And unlike you, I didn't buy my position through corruption and murder." She felt it then, the shift in the council's strategy. Through the bond, Killian caught it too, his tactical mind screaming warning just as Marcus made a sharp gesture. "Kill them," Marcus roared. "Kill the abomination and her corrupted mates. They're working with rogue wolves to destabilize pack authority." The enforcers moved as one, weapons raised, converging on the platform from all sides. The crowd screamed and scattered, but Cassie stood her ground. The tribond ignited. Golden light exploded from Cassie as her full alpha power unleashed. She threw up a shield that stopped bullets midair, sent them clattering harmlessly to the ground. Killian shifted partially, his tactical mind directing their defense through the bond. She could feel his strategy, implement it without words. Jax went full wolf, massive and devastating, his protective fury feeding her own power. They moved like water, like they'd been fighting together for centuries instead of days. An enforcer tried to flank Cassie. Jax was there before she had to turn, jaws crushing the rifle. Another aimed at Killian's head. Cassie's power yanked the weapon from his hands and sent him flying backward. "Silver Paw, Shadow Ridge, defend your alphas." Killian's command rang out, and the wolves who'd been training together, working together, building together for the past week responded instantly. The tide turned. Young wolves from both packs converged on the platform, forming a defensive line against the enforcers. Older wolves who'd been skeptical of the tribond saw the council's treachery with their own eyes and joined the defense. Cassie felt the moment the bond expanded beyond just her and her mates, felt it stretch to encompass the warriors fighting beside them, creating a temporary pack link that let her coordinate them all. She directed movement without speaking, guided attacks through pure intention, and the enforcers who'd expected an easy execution found themselves facing a unified force they couldn't match. Killian fought with lethal precision, taking down 3 enforcers with calculated strikes while simultaneously directing pack members to defensive positions. Jax was pure devastating force, protecting Cassie's flank with savage efficiency. And Cassie stood at the center, the Tribond Alpha the prophecy had promised, commanding both packs with authority that came from power freely given, not fear. Within minutes, the enforcers were retreating. Those who could still walk dragged their wounded toward the exits, only to find them blocked by pack members who'd finally seen the truth. The council members tried to run, tried to slip away in the chaos. But Jax's wolves had every exit covered, and there was nowhere to go. They were dragged back to the platform, forced to their knees before Cassie, Marcus, Sophia, and 3 others who'd orchestrated decades of corruption, staring up at the Tribond Alpha they'd tried to eliminate. "You have no authority," Marcus started. "I have the authority granted by ancient pack law," Cassie interrupted, her voice ringing with alpha command that made even the defiant council members bow their heads. "The authority of Tribond Alpha. The authority given by every wolf here who witnessed your treachery." She looked out at the crowd, hundreds of witnesses, pack members from a dozen territories. "I call for judgment. These council members stand accused of murder, conspiracy, profiteering from pack conflicts, and systematic elimination of Tribond bloodlines. How do you answer these charges?" "We were protecting pack purity," Sophia tried. "How do you answer?" Cassie's voice cracked like a whip. Silence. They had no defense because the evidence was overwhelming and the witnesses were everywhere. Then as Tribond Alpha, recognized by Silverpaw and Shadowridge packs, I passed judgment. Cassie felt the weight of it, felt every eye on her. "Marcus Cole, Sophia Blackwood, Thomas Gray, you are found guilty of murder and treason against pack law. The sentence is death." She felt Killian's approval through the bond, felt Jax's satisfaction, felt the crowd's acceptance of justice delivered. The executions were swift. Jax handled it personally. He'd earned that right after being exiled for refusing their corrupt orders. The other council members, those who'd been complicit but not directly involved in murder, were stripped of authority and exiled from pack lands permanently. When it was done, when justice had been served and the corruption purged, Cassie stood on the platform and felt the full weight of what they'd accomplished crash over her. Her father was avenged. The council that had manipulated generations of wolves was destroyed. The blood cycle that had fueled endless pack wars was broken. But her father was still dead. The restaurant he'd built was still ashes. And the cost of this victory, the lives lost, the trust shattered, the innocence destroyed, would never fully heal. Her knees buckled. Killian caught her left side, Jax her right, and together they held her upright as exhaustion and grief overwhelmed her in equal measure. "We won," she whispered. "We won," Killian confirmed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And we're not done yet," Jax added gently. "But for now, you can rest." Through the bond, she felt their fierce pride in her, their love, their commitment to building something better from the ashes of the old corrupt system. Cassie looked out at the crowd, wolves from rival packs standing together, young and old, traditional and progressive, all united by the truth they'd witnessed. The Tribond had done what the prophecy promised. Ended the blood cycle. United the divided. Now came the harder part, building a new world from the ruins of the old. But as Killian and Jax helped her off the platform, surrounded by pack members who looked at her not with fear, but with hope, Cassie thought maybe, just maybe, they could actually do it. Together. Recovery took longer than Cassie expected. Not from physical injuries, Alpha healing handled those within days, but from the emotional toll of everything that had happened. She spent the first week after the battle sleeping 14 hours a day, her body and mind finally allowing themselves to rest now that the immediate threat was eliminated. Killian and Jax took turns staying with her, respecting her need for space while making sure she was never truly alone. Through the bond, she could feel their concern, their patience, their unwavering presence even when they weren't physically in the room. On the 8th day, she woke to find both of them asleep in chairs beside the bed, clearly having kept vigil all night. Something in her chest cracked open at the sight. These two powerful alphas, exhausted from managing pack integration and territory restructuring, refusing to leave her side. "You're both idiots," she said softly. Jax's eyes opened immediately, dark and alert despite obvious exhaustion. Takes one to know one. Killian stirred more slowly, ice blue eyes finding hers with laser focus. How are you feeling? Like, I want to actually do something instead of lying here feeling sorry for myself. She sat up, ignoring their protests. What's the status of the merger? They exchanged a glance, then Killian pulled out his tablet. Silverpaw and Shadowridge have officially unified under the name Tricrown Pack. We're still working out leadership structures, but the younger wolves have been enthusiastic about integration. The older traditionalists are adjusting. Translation: they're pissed, but keeping their mouths shut because they saw what happened to the council, Jax added with grim satisfaction. And the restaurant? Construction is ahead of schedule, Killian said, pulling up architectural renderings. The Tribon Steakhouse will be larger than the original, with modern facilities, but maintaining your father's aesthetic. We've incorporated pack gathering spaces, neutral ground protections written into the building permits, and we saved the original sign, Jax interrupted. The iron grill sign that survived the fire. It's going in the main dining room as a memorial to your father. Cassie's throat tightened. You didn't have to do that. Yes, we did. Killian set the tablet aside, took her hand. Your father's legacy isn't just the building, Cassie. It's the idea that neutral ground can exist, that wolves don't have to be enemies just because they're from different packs. That's what we're building, what you're building. Through the bond, she felt his absolute conviction, felt Jax's fierce agreement. They believed in this vision, believed in her, with an intensity that was both terrifying and empowering. Then let's go see it, she said. The construction site was chaos in the best possible way. Wolves from both former packs worked side by side, the territorial aggression that had defined their relationship for decades replaced by genuine cooperation. A Silverpaw electrician was teaching a Shadowridge apprentice proper wiring technique. Two crews were arguing good-naturedly about the best way to install the commercial kitchen equipment. And in the center of it all, rising from the ruins of the iron grill, was something beautiful. The Tribon Steakhouse was larger, yes, but it maintained the warmth of the original. Exposed brick and reclaimed wood, floor-to-ceiling windows that would let light flood the space, a rooftop terrace that overlooked the entire territory. It was a statement, the old and new combined, tradition and innovation existing together. We incorporated some of your father's original design elements, Killian explained, walking her through the space. The bar is positioned exactly where it was before. The corner booth, your booth now, has been rebuilt with the original wood we salvaged. Cassie ran her hand over the smooth wood, feeling the memories soaked into the grain. Her father's hands had built this booth, had sat here with friends and rivals alike, had created a space where differences could be set aside over good food and honest conversation. He'd be proud of this, she said quietly. He'd be proud of you, Jax corrected, appearing at her shoulder with a hard hat that looked ridiculous on his rugged frame. You didn't just save his legacy, you expanded it. Made it something bigger than he ever imagined. Over the next month, Cassie threw herself into the work of building their new world. The physical construction of the restaurant was the easy part. The real challenge was integrating two packs that had been enemies for generations. She held daily sessions in the partially completed dining room, bringing together wolves from both sides to air grievances, negotiate territorial boundaries, establish new pack laws that honored both Silverpaw and Shadowridge traditions. It was exhausting, frustrating work. Old hatreds didn't disappear just because the council was gone. But slowly, progress emerged. A Silverpaw elder who'd lost his mate to pack violence found common ground with a Shadowridge widow over their shared grief. Young wolves who'd grown up hating each other discovered they had more in common than they'd thought. Cassie, Killian, and Jax led by example. They were never seen separately, the Tribond Alpha and her mates, always together, always united. When they made decisions, it was clear they'd consulted each other as equals. When they settled disputes, they incorporated perspectives from all three of their leadership styles. Killian brought structure and strategy, creating systems that prevented the kind of corruption that had plagued the council. Jax brought honor and directness, ensuring that pack members felt heard and protected. And Cassie brought balance, the bridge between civilization and wild that the prophecy had promised. The bond between them deepened daily. Cassie learned to navigate the complexity of loving two alphas who were as different as night and day. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Your support helps me create more stories like this one, and I love connecting with you. Until next time, remember, sometimes the impossible choice is the only one worth making.